Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 325 for the 11th of January 2015. Richard Saunders here with you from a soggy Sydney, Australia. The rains have come. It's actually a pleasant change. The last week has been very humid, very muggy, very warm with those sort of nights where you wake up in the middle because it's too damn hot to sleep, but today is a nice change. But you don't want to hear about the weather, or do you? Hang on, you can actually hear the weather. I'm downstairs today. Let me see. The sounds of rain dripping off the balcony. That's exciting for you, I know. You would rather hear about what's coming up on the Skeptic Zone this week. Quite frankly, so would I. We're going to start with Evidence Please with Jo Alabaster. And what a topic. What a week. What a Evidence Please it's going to be this week with Jo Alabaster. Some of you may know that there's an impending tour of an American named Sherry Tenpenny, who's coming out here to give a series of talks, or to appear at a series of talks. It's a little bit unclear. Basically, she's an anti-vaxxer, pushes the anti-vaccination message. And the response, the social media response to her coming out has been quite something, my friends, quite something. Jo will cover this shortly. It's extensive. We've had venues cancel her talk, right, left and centre. We've had lots of media, especially print, but some radio, some television concerning her. Dr. Raichi even appeared on the project, which I think we'll be hearing that audio soon, to talk about her, as well as Alison Gaylard from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters. It brings up many interesting topics, especially in light of the events of Paris in the last few days, and free speech, and people saying, well, she shouldn't be allowed to come here, deny her visa because she's going to come out here and spew her dangerous nonsense. And other people saying, well, look, we don't agree with her dangerous nonsense, but surely she has the right to come here and put her views. It's a tricky one, it really is. Ultimately, I would take the view, I think, that yes, even though I would disagree with everything she says, she should have the right to say it, but the rest of us certainly have the right to strongly object to her saying it, and people have the right not to have her at events and venues and say, no, you can't say this thing here at our event or our venue, go away. That's their right too. Jo will be covering lots of these issues coming up with Evidence Please. Following that, It's a Week in Science. Yes, they're back. A Week in Science from the Royal Institution of Australia. Can't wait to hear that. The welcome return of A Week in Science. And after that, it's the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson. Heidi from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters group. Now, she and Alison Gaylard were the subjects of a newspaper report last week about their group and how they were maybe labelled hippies once, but now they embrace the clear scientific method, which includes the benefits of vaccination. And so we'll hear that report. Heidi will read that report by Jane Hansen. And then Heidi will discuss some of the backlash, some of the, what we call the flying monkeys, the anti-vaxxers up in that area who have aghast, horrified, quaking in their boots that somebody could be once considered to be alternative and now embracing common sense, so to speak. So Heidi will tell us about those and read out some of those replies on Facebook and Twitter and so forth. And then to round off the show, Maynard Spooky Action chats to Michael Marshall, who was a guest of the Australian Skeptics at our recent convention just late last year in November. And this is the first part of a two-parter. So today we'll hear from Michael Marshall, part 1, and next week we'll round off that interview, part 2. Thank you to those people who keep buying the Vaccination Chronicles DVD at www.skepticzone.tv. Just scroll down on the left, you can see the link. You can buy your own copy, which is designed to be copied by you and given away to people who then can copy it and give it away, and so on and so forth. $12 covers the production and postage anywhere in the world. It's in the PAL format, but it should work on most modern TVs and DVD players, and certainly would work on computers. And it's also a way for you to show your support for the message of vaccination and your support for the Skeptic Zone. That's great. I've just sent out a couple yesterday. One went to Minnesota. Yeah, one went to Minnesota. Various places around Australia. Good to get that DVD out there. And, of course, if you just do a Google search on The Vaccination Chronicles or go to skepticzone.tv, you can see that documentary online. The DVD has extra features. It's got extended interviews and lots of languages. Lots of subtitles in different languages. But now it's time for me to wander over to the kitchen, get some sourdough bread, make some nice crusty toast, light smear of cream cheese, and then put some poached eggs on top of that. Nice cup of coffee. Well, I am enjoying my late breakfast. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
What we want is some more evidence, please. Here's Jo Alabaster.
Hello, this is Jo Alabaster. Well, it's been a huge week here for Australian skeptics and supporters of evidence-based medicine, with the recent announcement that Sherry Tenpenny, American anti-vaccination campaigner, is planning a tour of Australia, in which she's been booked to speak at several parenting seminars and dinners. The news was broken by our blogger friend Reasonable Hank on the 29th of December, with his post, 2015 Anti-Vaccine Tour of Australia, the Tenpenny Caravan of Hurt. Hank let us know that the Gankin Man Foundation and Get Rid of SIDS Project Inc. are selling tickets to seminars called Birth, Baby and Beyond, a full-day event in which Tenpenny is to be joined by others, including homeopath Isaac Golden, and Raising Healthy Children Naturally, a 3-hour presentation by Tenpenny. Additionally, tickets are available for a series of special dinner events, featuring a talk by Tenpenny, music and special guests. Advocacy groups and concerned individuals, including grassroots lobbyists, Stop the Australian Vaccination Network, the Parenthood, and various associations of medical and public health practitioners, responded to this news with a firm message that Sherry Tenpenny and the anti-vaccination movement are spreading dangerous misinformation and present a threat to children and communities. Within days, a social media campaign, operating on Twitter under the hashtag #StopTenpenny, had formed, spreading the word that an anti-vaccinationist was set to tour Australia. Individuals contacted venues via Facebook, Twitter, email and phone to ensure that they realised who it was that they were booked to host. Several online petitions were set up, some directed at the venues requesting that they cancel their bookings and not facilitate the spread of anti-vaccine misinformation, others directed at the Minister for Immigration, Peter Dutton MP, to request that he reconsider allowing Sherry Tenpenny into the country following the recent deportation of pickup artist speaker Julian Blanc. Others contacted Peter Dutton, asking him to check whether Tenpenny's visa allowed her to conduct paid speaking engagements. The two approaches, contacting the venues and contacting the Minister for Immigration, merged under the Stop Tenpenny campaign. And I think that it's important to note that while not everybody agrees on the same approach to halting Tenpenny's speaking engagements in Australia, we're all united in our desire to stop anti-vaccination misinformation spreading and endangering children whose parents may choose to forgo vaccination, and the wider community as a result. The campaign to stop Tenpenny began to attract some attention. A week ago, on Sunday the 4th of January, an article by Jane Hanson ran in the Daily Telegraph titled "Pro-Vaccine Lobby Fight to Stop US Anti-Vaccination Campaigner Sherry Tenpenny Lecturing in Australia." On Monday the 5th of January, more articles discussing the campaign appeared on Mamamia, the Daily Mail, Newscom.au and in The Guardian, and the ABC's flagship current affairs program, the 7:30 Report, ran a feature on the American anti-vaccination movement, featuring an interview with Dr. Paul Offit, paediatrician specialising in infectious diseases, which mentioned Tenpenny's planned tour of Australia. The Stop Tenpenny campaign gained speed rapidly. By Tuesday, 12 more items of media coverage were published. And I'm going to have to stop mentioning each of them here at this point, because as this report goes to air, by my count, there are 37 articles, radio pieces and reports in the media about the response to Tenpenny's proposed tour of Australia. I'll upload a list of links to news items to my blog at evidenceplease.net, along with a transcript of this report. And I'd like to give huge kudos again at this point to blogger Reasonable Hank, who's been keeping a running list of news items, which I've checked against my own running database to ensure I haven't missed any. One notable item of Tuesday's media coverage, however, was the segment that ran on The Project, Network 10's panel discussing current affairs. The media have been contacting some of the spokespeople involved with Stop the Australian Vaccination Network for comment on Tenpenny's tour, and in order to encourage journalists not to contribute to false balance in the media, many of the Stop the AVN spokespeople refuse to appear on television or radio when an anti-vaccination campaigner has also been invited to take part in the discussion. This approach has been largely successful, with less airtime given to anti-vaccinationists. When vaccination advocate Dr. Rachel Dunlop, who had been approached by the project for an interview, learned that Meryl Dorey had also been invited on the show for an interview, she withdrew her offer to appear, explaining her position regarding media appearances alongside anti-vaccinationists. Admirably, the producers took her stance on board. When the project went to air on Tuesday evening, there were no sound bites from Meryl Dorey nor any other anti-vaccination campaigner. The project did speak with Jamila Rizvi, editor-in-chief of Mamamia, and Dr. Rachel Dunlop. Then had our friend Alison Gaylard from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters take part in the panel discussion live from her home in Mullumbimby. Here's the audio of the project segment.
Calls to ban a prominent anti-vaccine campaigner from entering the country.
And a foreign speaker is coming to Australia to spread dangerous lies to a vulnerable public. But Sherry Tenpenny's no terrorist. She's an anti-vaccination campaigner. Here's why many Aussies want to keep her out of the country.
This woman and the groups that she's associated with are quite simply a danger to Australian lives, and particularly a danger to the lives of Australians' children.
Let's be really clear. There's no evidence that vaccines cause any conditional illness, and there's abundant evidence that vaccines have saved hundreds of millions of lives.
This is one of those cases where, on the one hand, you've got science, and on the other hand, there really isn't another hand.
We know from years and years of research and thousands of publications that vaccines are overwhelmingly safe and effective.
But if the science is so clear, why are science advocates afraid to let anti-vaccination campaigner Sherry Tenpenny speak?
When you're a new parent, you are very vulnerable to the information that's out there because you really do want to do the best by your child.
Of course, parents have the right to be concerned about a medical procedure, but overwhelmingly they need access to accurate science-based information, and this is not what they will get from Dr. Tenpenny.
The problem with Tenpenny's message is it doesn't just affect her followers. Vaccine refusal leads to dangerous outbreaks. Just today we learned 2 children and a 35-year-old man contracted measles at a Melbourne graduation ceremony.
The Minister for Immigration has the right to refuse entry into this country for someone who might pose a danger to our society, and that is exactly what this woman does.
This is not so much an issue of freedom of speech, it's an issue of public health. And the people most at risk from this misinformation will be children who may get sick and in extreme cases could die.
What do you think about letting her into the country, Adam?
No, I don't think it's I don't think she should come. I've seen some people arguing on Facebook, this is free speech, she should be able to come and say, your free speech ends at the point that my kids could get dangerously ill.
It makes me so angry. It's such a first world issue. Like, there's people in the third world that would do anything to have access to the vaccines that some people are going, oh, I don't know, they might cause, autism, when there is no proof that they cause autism. Like, there's no scientific evidence, as Jamila said there, but yet we allow the debate to continue.
I agree with Adam. Our kids don't get the vote, so we need to protect them, and they're at risk more than anyone else. So.
I mean, I don't have kids myself, but I may be a compromise position. Say she can come on a boat, she'll never get here. Alison Gaillard's children got whooping cough because other parents didn't vaccinate their children. She lives in Mullumbimby, which has the lowest vaccination rate in New South Wales, and she's so passionate, she started her own pro-vaccination group. Alison, tell us your story.
I didn't have to address the subject of vaccination until 2006, when I had my first child, and I then discovered that I was living in an area where a number of people choose not to vaccinate, and I really couldn't understand it. I was always going to vaccinate. I was quite shocked, and I had my second in 2009. In 2012, they both contracted whooping cough. They were fully vaccinated for their ages. The reason they caught whooping cough is the herd immunity here is just so low that there's no herd protection. Herd immunity is when a certain percentage of the population of the area that you're living in are vaccinated, and then it stops all those bugs and germs and viruses penetrating in and causing an outbreak.
And how high does the herd immunity need to be for it to be effective?
Well, ideally, you'd need a minimum of 95%.
I believe, Alison, that you also live quite an alternative lifestyle, that you believe in a lot of the things that, your other friends and people living in that area do, but this is one issue where you just don't think there is any debate on.
No, that's right. Back in 2006, with my first child, she ate nothing but organic produce. I used cloth nappies, amber teething necklaces. I just want to show people that no matter what your lifestyle is, be it how you live your life, what you do with your life, who you pray to, doesn't matter, you can still vaccinate.
Alison, thanks so much for speaking to us tonight.
Thank you.
I find it incredibly heartening that the media seem to be very much on board with promoting an evidence-based approach to the topic of vaccination, possibly giving up a little sensationalism along the way. On Wednesday, one radio station did air a live interview with a prominent Australian anti-vaccination campaigner, but promptly removed it from their website when it was brought to their attention that said anti-vaccinationist made statements which were provably false. On Thursday, another radio station, 3AW, decided to interview Meryl Dorey. Now, this interview actually got some media coverage of its own. There's an article in The Guardian written by Oliver Millman titled, Anti-Vaccination Campaigner Compares Critics to Charlie Hebdo Attackers. Yes, really. Meanwhile, other news was unfolding. Late Wednesday, the first reports began to go public that venues who'd been booked to host events featuring Sherry Tenpenny were cancelling their bookings. Karela Golf and Social Club in Sydney announced that they were not going to host Sherry Tenpenny's event, stating that they did not wish to be associated with such controversial subject matter. Dennis Skinner, manager of Karela Golf and Social Club, said that there was no indication it was an anti-vaccination booking when it was made. Quote, it was booked as a health and wellbeing seminar for a Get Rid of SIDS, Sudden Infant Death Syndrome project, end quote. Indeed, it seems that the bookings made by the Gankin Man Foundation and Get Rid of SIDS Project Inc. were not open about the nature of the information to be presented at the events. As this report goes to air, 5 of the 7 venues who'd been booked to host seminars and dinners have cancelled their bookings. Public statements from the venues are collected on Reasonable Hank's blog in a post titled, Venues Confirm Being Misled by Anti-Vaccine Messenger, Tenpenny Tour. Messenger? While the Gan Kim Man Foundation and Get Rid of SIDS Project websites don't have any names published to let the public know who is behind them, indeed I haven't been able to find any evidence that the Gan Kim Man Foundation is a registered organisation at all, several media reports have revealed that the Tenpenny tour is being organised by Stephanie Messenger, author of the anti-vaccination book for children, Melanie's Marvellous Measles. Further, money for tickets purchased by Eventbrite is paid directly into a PayPal account held by Stephanie Messenger. With so many venues cancelling, there is uncertainty as to whether the Tenpenny tour will go ahead. There have been no statements made on the Gan Kim Man Foundation's website or Facebook page since venues began to cancel, nor on the Birth Baby and Beyond Facebook event page. No emails have been sent to ticket holders. The only statements I've been able to find are on the Ticket Sales site, hosted by Eventbrite, on the pages of the cancelled events, under Venue. Quote, "Venue to be decided. Please book your ticket and you'll be notified in due course of the venue. The venue has withdrawn our bookings due to bullying by some denying you the right to informed consent. See more in the events details on the left." End quote. And in the events details section, quote, "Important note. The venue has cancelled the booking due to bullying by vested interests who do not believe in informed consent, free speech and respect for others' rights, and who appear to support censorship of thought and science. A new venue is being sought now, so please book your ticket. You'll be notified of the new venue in due time. Thank you." End quote. There has been a lot of talk about free speech and censorship during the Stop Tenpenny campaign, from the anti-vaccinationists, among supporters of Stop Tenpenny campaign, and from one of the two venues who are still booked to host Tenpenny events. I'd like to finish off today with a statement from the Stop the Australian Vaccination Network admins, published today, the 11th of January. Quote, "There seems to have been some misunderstanding of what our views and intentions are regarding Tenpenny's visit. This misunderstanding has been further confused in the media by the implication of SAVN in creating the petitions regarding Tenpenny, when in fact it has been SAVN supporters. The shifting of the debate to free speech and visas is getting away from the point. This is all about Aussies not wanting cranks to come here spreading lies that kill kids, and if she comes anyway, to limit the damage she causes. Just like we've prevented other people of poor character from coming here to speak, Tenpenny is not being gagged. She'll continue to spout her delusions from all the forums available to her, just as before. Australia is not obligated to provide her with an additional one. Some would have us challenge Tenpenny with facts. The fact is that the evidence for the safety and efficacy of vaccination is overwhelming and obvious to all sensible people. We don't need to debate the obvious, and anti-vaccine activists use public debate as a platform for spreading and legitimising their lies, misinformation and medical conspiracy theories. Crying freedom of speech is also a classic anti-vax strategy to deflect criticism of their misinformation, pseudoscience and lies. It is a well-worn tactic of the AVSN and their public officer. The message or speech of the AVN has already been limited by the HCCC warning. Why is Tenpenny's message, which is exactly the same as the AVSN, any different? Free speech protects us from persecution and punishment, but not criticism. It does not guarantee a platform anywhere you like. In democracies, you have the right to speak. You don't have the right to be heard. Free speech also extends to venues having the right to say no to Dr. Tenpenny. We support free speech, but we also support the right to publicly criticise and counter people who want to spread fear, hysteria and misinformation. SAVN admins." End quote. Again, all links mentioned in this report and a transcript can be found on my blog at evidenceplease.net. The Skeptic Zone will have an update when more news comes to hand on Tenpenny's tour of Australia. Until then, I'd like to acknowledge the tireless work of many vaccination advocates, including the spokespeople for Stop the AVN, the bloggers, those who've kept an eye out for reports and captured audio and video, and everyone who's taken the time to engage with the media, the venues, and on social media with the general public. This has been an amazingly successful campaign so far, and is once again showing that we can effectively band together and make a stand for evidence-based medicine and the health of Australian kids.
The Skeptic Zone is brought to you by Dr. Bob's Trivia Quiz. Visit drbobsquiz.wordpress.com and see if you can match wits with Dr. Bob.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. Everyone knows that joker, the one that can't resist an April Fool's prank or loves winding people up with a fanciful story. It's time to look at how and why people lie. So why do we lie? Believe it or not, there is actually research that looks into why and how humans lie. One possible explanation is that lying is tied with our self-esteem. As soon as someone's self-esteem is threatened, they begin to tell bigger and more complicated lies. I once played in a band and we played at Glastonbury.
Lie.
The other main reason humans lie is to protect ourselves or someone we know from something bad happening, or to protect privacy. Hey? Nah, I don't know where Karen is.
Lie.
As humans, we also deceive ourselves. Experiments show people lie without realising. They only see their lies when they watch a recording of themselves. Not me though, everything I've said is true.
No, it's not.
But do people always lie the same way? Well, no. People lie more online than they do face to face. In an experiment, people were found to lie more often in an email exchange than an online messenger conversation, and both more than face to face. And what about online dating? Yep, we lie there too, with women lying slightly more than men. However, men lie more than women in games with a small monetary reward. But when the stakes are increased, men and women lie the same amount. And teenagers? Yep, research shows they lie more than university students or adults. Or maybe they're just more honest about their lying. And now, 4 fast facts about spotting a liar. One experiment has shown that different types of hand gestures may be the way to spot liars. Truth tellers use rhythmic gestures and liars speech prompting gestures. One tactic that might trip up lies is by getting them to tell their story in reverse. The brain effort required to invent a story in reverse is far higher than forwards. A third way to tell a liar? Get them to draw a picture. Liars generally don't prepare for that, so can find it tough to draw their story. And finally, the old myth about lies avoiding eye contact is not true. In fact, too much eye contact may be a giveaway as the liar looks to see if you're believing their story. That's it for this Week in Science. For more information on honesty and lying, go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Ben Lewis, and we'll catch you next week.
Hi, I'm Finn.
And I'm Rebecca, and we're the Skepticons. Skepticons is an Irish podcast by the Dublin Skeptic Society. It takes a conversational, irreverent look at science, news and skeptical topics from an Irish perspective. You can find us at www.theskepticons.com.
You're always spirit with your strong finding.
It's the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson.
Hi everyone. Last week, myself and Alison Gaylard, another admin at the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters group, were interviewed by journalist Jane Hanson from the Daily Telegraph newspaper. Now, as you may know, Alison and I live in the region of Australia that has the lowest rate of unvaccinated kids at just under 50%. This Northern Rivers area of New South Wales also has the reputation of having many here who embrace so-called alternative lifestyles, with alternative medicines such as homeopathy and naturopathy being a big part of their lives. Considering this is the Skeptic Zone, I thought it would be wise to add a trigger warning at this point for all evidence-demanding, science-loving skeptics. This article I'm about to read out will include various alternative therapies that I have tried during my lifetime, not as a skeptic investigating them, but as a person with severely underdeveloped critical thinking skills. And the list of ones mentioned is by no means exhaustive. There, I've said it. Please be gentle with me. So what we wanted to get across in this article was that an alternative lifestyle and vaccinating your kids do not have to be mutually exclusive. So telling our own stories of how we lived aspects of that lifestyle and still vaccinated our kids was, we thought, important. Unfortunately, homeoprophylaxis is commonly used here as the quote-unquote natural way to go, rather than injecting children with perceived unnatural chemicals and toxins. We need to get the message across that vaccination is the best way, the only way, to effectively protect people against vaccine-preventable diseases, and to emphasise the important role that herd immunity plays. We don't fool ourselves into thinking that the staunch anti-vaccination proponents will listen to what we are saying and have a light bulb moment. We know they're not going to go out and vaccinate themselves and their children. But there are fence sitters, there are tree changers and sea changers that flock to this area and find themselves caught up in the alternative lifestyle ideology. And there are teenagers, the next generations, who will have to make the decision of whether or not to vaccinate their kids. These are the groups we are trying to reach. Okay, so I'll read the article. It's called Ex-Hippies Blow Whistle on Anti-Vaccination Myths by Jane Hanson, Sunday Telegraph, January the 4th, 2015. Heidi Robertson is the daughter of a Reiki master, and Alison Gaylard once wore a nose ring and clad her babies in cloth nappies and amber beads. Now the pair represents the real alternative alternates. They believe in vaccination, and they are fighting in Mullumbimby with the lowest vaccination rate in Australia. Ms. Gaylard and Mrs. Robertson are the faces behind the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters group, set up to counter the misinformation peddled by another loud local whose influence has now been seriously eroded, Meryl Dorey from the anti-vaccination group, the AVSN. But their message is clear and simple. It's okay to be alternative, but it's also okay to vaccinate. While Ms. Gaylard always believed in vaccination, when her daughter Alice was born 9 years ago, a friend ambushed her with an introduction to Ms. Dorey for an anti-vaccination talk. It made me angry. I was going to vaccinate. It was a no-brainer, she said. Ms. Gaylard left her mother's group because, quote, they were all buying into not vaccinating and I felt alone, end quote. Both her fully immunised daughters were infected in a 2012 whooping cough epidemic that hit hardest in northern New South Wales due to low vaccination. Quote, I was distraught. I felt I was doing the right thing to protect them and other people weren't. There was no herd immunity and it was inevitable, end quote. Mrs. Robertson was left broke and disillusioned by years of alternative therapies for her chronic fatigue. Quote, I went to naturopaths, had tissue and hair mineral analysis, live blood analysis, kinesiology and Reiki. I signed up for a chiropractor for a year. I spent thousands of dollars, end quote. A new GP diagnosed depression and prescribed life-changing medication. Quote, I had been so gullible without thinking it through critically and then realised it was woo, end quote, she said. Both women have suffered attacks from anti-vaccination believers. Quote, these peace-loving, tolerant people can be extremely nasty on the subject of vaccination, so we try to be calm and polite and rational, Mrs. Robertson said. So there's the article. The backlash from the anti-vaccination crowd was always going to be inevitable. So that's okay. I'm happy to say that I was prepared for it, and for the first time I was not in the least bit fazed by the attacks. And Alison too has come out unscathed emotionally. It was interesting to see how many people pounced on the fact that vaccines don't work because Alison's fully immunised kids contracted whooping cough. This indicates a basic misunderstanding of how vaccines do and don't work. For those of you who are new to this topic, Here's the reason why it is not surprising that the kids got whooping cough. Firstly, we need a better pertussis or whooping cough vaccine. The current vaccine we have is less effective than the old one that was used, but the old one was ditched because of a perceived unacceptable incidence of fevers and localised reactions such as redness and swelling in children following the shot. So, the current vaccine has about 84% efficacy rate for kids who have had the course of 3 shots. Another important thing to remember is that the pertussis vaccine is better at attenuating or weakening the disease rather than preventing it entirely. Secondly, the herd immunity levels need to be up around the 95% mark to limit the spread of disease in a community. Mark Crislip over at Science Based Medicine wrote an excellent blog on herd immunity, and I quote from that. The decrease in the number of disease carriers is vital to the prevention of bacterial infections. Vaccines are never 100% effective. Some people are genetically unable to respond to the vaccine. Some have immunodeficiencies that preclude receiving vaccines or developing a response to the vaccine. Some haven't gotten around to vaccination or are too young to receive a vaccine. If you vaccinate a large number of people, besides preventing disease in an individual, it helps prevent the vulnerable in a population. Vaccines prevent disease propagation. Now, remember that Mullumbimby, where the kids contracted whooping cough, has vaccination rates that are worse than South Sudan at under 50%. It is not at all surprising that the kids contracted whooping cough. People also leapt onto the fact that I apparently had chronic fatigue syndrome when, in fact, it didn't say that at all. I merely had fatigue that was chronic. Anyway, trying to discredit us with personal attacks and comments that have nothing to do with the issue at hand has been a typical response. So here are some of the comments in various threads on Facebook after the article went online. And please note, I am reading these comments exactly as they were written, so I take no responsibility for the incoherence and or poor grammar that is evident in the following. Both her fully immunised daughters were infected in a 2012 epidemic and they didn't learn their lesson. That's called bad parenting. They were never hippies, just trolls. Being an ex-hippie makes you a god of vaccine knowledge, please, an opinion with nothing to back it up. These traitors, piece of bleep, are why depopulation is a good idea sometimes. The world is full of scum like this. They'd sell their souls for cash and misinform people. It's insane. Kind of scary you think she's not sharpest crayon in the box, considering she thinks just like most doctors and government officials... caps lock scary. We used to have to do logic statements at school. Statement A, statement B. What is the most logical conclusion? A, people are vaccinated. B, they are catching diseases from unvaccinated people. Logical conclusion, their vaccinations do not work. Caps lock logic. Traitors to us all. Her fully vaxxed kids got whooping cough. No surprise there. She was diagnosed with depression and put on medication. No surprise there either. Her brain has been warped. What a weak soul. So because the hippie was depressed and enjoyed the medicated high, she is a firm believer that vaccinations work. This story is totally fabricated. I have seen this repeatedly, actually same exact story, and it is from Australia. That is a huge red flag as BS. Australia has a stronghold over anything holistic. I have had trolls from Australia try and attack me on Twitter and other social media. Some even at least claim to be actual researchers who were proving safety and efficacy of Gardasil. What a joke. It was mostly one-liners trying to bash me. It was ineffective, and eventually they gave up after I call them out on different things and make them look ignorant. Once again, that story is fabricated to someone who is educated enough to know better. The story is not really even plausible if memory serves me without rereading the entire thing again. I'm positive they are shills planted by the drug cartels. I hope this woman gets over her depression and chronic fatigue and her need for drug company endorsement too. She's a shill, definitely. Paid shill. She probably needed to stay true to her hippie philosophy and meditate instead of medicate. I'll be sure to send her some shampoo and a brush for that bird's nest. Heidi's GP prescribed a placebo, in other words. She has an unfortunate name. There was also an insinuation that I was the same person who wrote an article for Voices for Vaccines purely because myself and the author for that particular piece both suffered depression. So, another day, another non-existent dollar from the pharma companies. Alison and I are still waiting. This has been Heidi Robertson from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters. Give us some love in the way of a like on our Facebook page or a follow on Twitter. And check out our website at www.nrvs.info for more information or to contact us. Thank you.
Are you enjoying the Skeptic Zone podcast and wondering where you can find more skeptical information? Skeptics on the Net is an online directory for everything skeptical. It features listings for skeptical podcasts, blogs, people, local groups, and more. It also includes the SOTN blog, where people in the know write introductions to their favorite skeptical and pseudoscientific topics. Please visit skepticsonthe.net.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
I couldn't be more excited because I'm with one of the biggest skeptics in the UK. We've got
Marsh.
From
the Merseyside Skeptic Society, from Skeptics with a K, from this and that, really, a bit everywhere.
And I'm so excited to meet you because I'm a huge fan of Skeptics with a K. It's one of those shows that I enjoy it when it comes out. The only complaint I've got is you're slack, you don't do it enough. It's only once a fortnight.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to get Mike motivated. I think that's the problem. He's a surly, aggressive kind of guy. If you meet him, he'll bite your face off before I look at it. No, that's not true. That's not true at all. But I think Mike puts a huge amount of effort into actually editing it and things, and we like to try and keep it fresh. But it's funny, the show really came from the fact that the first time I ever met Mike is when we started the Merseyside Skeptic Society. I'd never met him before in my life. I had no idea who he was. We just both ended up in this pub because he put a post up a meetup, and then the moment we sat down, we had exactly the same rapport that we have on the show. It was kind of weird, seeing as Mike doesn't really speak to a lot of people, but it was just instant.
Is there something about Liverpool and scepticism? Is the Merseyside a particularly sceptical place? Is there a reason why it happened there?
You know what? I don't know. I think in part it was to do with the people who were around. So the couple of us all had the same kind of ethos when we got together. We had this kind of feeling that we just wanted to try and affect what's around us. We wanted to kind of take this. And maybe Liverpool has a slightly cheeky reputation. It kind of has a bit of a reputation for, standing no bullshit. There's not a lot of kind of pretension, I think, in Liverpool. So maybe that's kind of it. They have this kind of rebellious attitude a little bit as a place that if you can't stand up, then
Look, people don't get confused because Brian Cox is from the north, but he's from a different part of the north. You actually secretly hate him and want him seen killed.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the contract killer I've had following him for some time is utterly useless, because the problem is Brian Cox spends so much of his time in helicopters. How do you get a hitman there? It's almost impossible. I can't afford a hitman to hire a private, so you have to find the very rare times when his feet touch the ground.
Wow.
And he's like a starling. He sleeps on the wing. He sleeps in the air at all times. He never touches the ground. He hasn't touched the ground since, I think, 2006, I think. He put one foot down once.
And he's always somewhere drinking dirty water or pointing at the sky, and he always seems to be standing on a rock in the middle of nowhere with something circling him.
Yeah, that's his natural habitat. I think it's like when you see birds.
Imagine how bored he must be, waiting for that helicopter to come around. He must be playing Angry Birds or something, waiting.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's when you see birds kind of migrating throughout the year. Brian Cox is his natural kind of thing. Yeah, he'll leave him on a rock over there, and then he'll return back to Manchester to nestle and do a little bit of lecturing, and then he'll be back off again, back on the wing. Yeah.
And tell me, why is there such a rivalry between Manchester and Liverpool?
I think it goes back like centuries, really. I have to confess, I'm from neither Liverpool nor Manchester. I'm from the northeast, which is a very, very different place, Newcastle. But I think it kind of goes back to kind of the Industrial Revolution and where the kind of heart of things really sort of springing up was. But yeah, I guess it's kind of that, and it is a rivalry, but at the same time, it's kind of a jocular rivalry. Liverpool has this attitude, I think, and it's always had this attitude, being a port town, that if you're here, you're us, and everywhere else, be it Manchester or the place 20 miles down the road, they're foreigners to us. But if you're in Liverpool, you're one of us. So it's got this really kind of us against the world mentality, or it has done for a long time.
And what is the main woo that Merseyside skeptics and you yourself personally fight against and are the most interested in trying to do something about?
There's probably two. So I think homeopathy was a big thing for us. We did the 1023 campaign, which Australia participated in, were fantastic support for us as well, when we had 1,700 people in 30 countries around the world. And we had a real effect on some elements of homeopathy in the UK. And, I mean, Brazil dropped homeopathy from their health service after the 1023 campaign because of the Rio de Janeiro and the Porto Alegre 1023 campaigns. It was kind of nuts. So we've had a real look there. And then psychics, they're a personal bugbear of mine. I'll be speaking about psychics tomorrow here at the convention.
Are there more psychics per capita in the UK or the US?
You know, I don't know. But
because there seem to be more psychic shows in the UK that go around.
Well, I think that's because of the way that the psychic kind of industry is set up in the UK. You always have a couple of really big touring psychics, and this goes back to the days of like Doris Stokes and people like that. And what tends to happen is someone is the leading psychic, and they'll be riding the crest away for a while. They'll start to tail off, and someone will just come up and take that place. So we've had, Derek Acora has been the big guy. Colin Fry has been the big guy. Currently, it's Sally Morgan, who I know very, very well at the moment. She does like 200 shows a year.
Do any of them do a different style? Because as we know, magic kind of changes stylistically. Do any of these do a different sort of stylistic psychic show? Are they doing anything different from what they were doing in the 1800s?
I'd say so. And the thing that gets me, and when you go and see these shows, and I urge people, if you haven't seen a psychic show, go and see one.
Yes, that was what I was going to say, because as part of the Skeptics with a K, you say some things to do when you go along, and as a skeptic, non-believer, go along and have a look and see what happens, and also meet the people who do go and believe in it.
Yeah, because it's very easy for us to sit back and say, well, people think this is just entertainment, but people really believe this. I've probably seen 25, 30 psychic shows over the last 6 years of doing this, and I've never been at a show where somebody didn't wholeheartedly believe it, where there wasn't somebody in tears, somebody incredibly moved. And if it's real, then great, and if it's not real, that's pretty bad, really. So I would say if you get a chance to go to these psychic shows, the cost of admittance is the price of an education. You always learn something. But when you talk about the style, one of the things that I think Sally Morgan in particular, I'm really impressed by from a showmanship perspective, is that I think she was one of the first big psychics in the UK to turn the camera on the audience. So you say I've got like a John coming through, and instead of just the psychic being the one on camera on the big screens where everyone gets to sort of lap up and adore their image, it's now the person in the audience in front of 1,000 people. And when you see yourself up there, there's this pressure to go like, you don't want to say, no, that makes no sense to me, because you look like an idiot, or that's how you feel. So you've got this real emotional pressure to find something, and you make it fit.
A little bit like stage hypnotism.
Yeah, I think there's an element to that. And the other thing I've seen Sally Morgan do, which I've seen others emulate it since, is that when she gets a connection with someone, she says, well, could you stand up? Sometimes when the energies come through, they can be a bit hard to handle. Have you got other friends with you? Could they stand up as well? And then she's now got 3 people stood up, and she'll say a reading for this person in the middle, and then she'll say and then there's the dog, and this person doesn't have a dog. So she'll turn to the person stood next to them, do you have the dog? And now she's reading 3 people at once. And then she'll come up with another detail, once you're reading these 3 people, she'll come up with another detail that doesn't fit any of those. And she'll say, well, hold on just a second, this might be for someone else, but it might be for you. Could you just stay standing? Does this make sense to anyone else? And someone will stand up. And that person, well, when the energies come through, sometimes it's quite hard. Have you got other people? So now she's got 6 people stood up. And at that point, I could do a psychic reading for 6 people at once, because you throw something out, not only is it likely to fit one of them, but now you've got this pressure that people want to have a reading. So they'll fight each other for it. They'll try and be first to get Steve is my neighbour's brother-in-law. That's who you must mean. So this is definitely for me, so please stick with me.
So how does someone like her, or most psychics in the UK, describe their connection? Do they see someone? Do they hear something? How do they describe the connection they're having with people that have died?
You know what? They'll keep it as woolly as possible, I think, a lot of the time. I saw a psychic recently, Paula O'Brien, and she would say that she was an empath, so she felt stuff all the time. It was all emotion. When something happened, she'd be incredibly emotive about it, even to a point where she was, in my opinion, faking tears constantly. So she'd be like, your mother says you're so beautiful, and then she'd snap out of it again, and it felt really manipulative. But even midway through that reading, or even midway through her show, she said to someone, and your father, where is he? And the woman said, oh, my father's dead. And Paula said, oh, he's just walked in, I can see him. Well, that's pretty convenient that the guy walked in after you heard that he was dead. Yeah, it's a shame he didn't walk in first.
So he can open a portal to the netherworld any time.
Yeah, I think so. They can see people, they can hear people. So a lot of them will try and leave it loose so that they can say anything they want at any time. And it might, maybe they're genuine, maybe that's how it works. If they're not genuine, then it certainly would benefit them to have complete flexibility about how they want to get information through. So they don't have to, when they say, I've got your dad here, and so it says, oh, what's he look like? Oh, I don't know, I can't see him. He's not here, I can just sense him. it gives you so many outs if you want to be challenged.
You've had skeptics handing out flyers outside the show. What way do you think there is to get to people to go to these shows to maybe think about, is this really real or not? Because you're challenging their belief in meeting their loved ones again.
Yeah, and I think this is why scepticism, I think it's really useful really important that we've moved away from this bombastic approach of saying, well, you're all just gullible fools and all psychics are liars and frauds. And we've moved on from that, I think, because all that does is make you saying it feel better. The person you're talking to just shuts down immediately. You're not going to reach those people. So what we did with the flyers that we're handing out during Psychic Awareness Month, which was October, the flyers were saying, here's how to spot a genuine psychic. So maybe there are genuine psychics out there, but there are some things you can do to pretend to be psychic. So maybe the person you're seeing might be psychic. The next guy you see, how do you know he's psychic? Well, here's some things to look out for. And if they're doing this, maybe you've got cause to question. If they're doing none of this, they've got nothing to worry about. None of these things here are applying to them. And I think when we were handing these flyers out, people were really receptive. I mean, I had very, very few people say to me, what you're doing is wrong. Loads of people even stayed in conversation and said, so what, why are you doing this? And I said, well, it's important to me that we figure out if this is real or not. Maybe it's real, maybe it isn't. But the fact that the question still exists is enough to make this an important issue, because so many people place so much emotional energy in this. They really put a lot of investment in this. I saw one woman at a show who we'd established that her husband had died. And then the psychic found out that this woman had tried to commit suicide on 2 occasions. And the psychic, first of all, told her, well, these are your husband's words now. He's saying if you try it again, you'd be left in a wheelchair drinking through a straw. That's pretty horrible stuff if it's not true. And the next thing we found out was that this woman had seen a psychic a couple of years ago. She was going to scatter her husband's ashes somewhere. This psychic had said, don't do that. It's really important you keep them with you. So since then, she'd been taking a pinch of his ashes and then rubbing them across her chest before she left. Right. That someone can have that amount of power over someone means it's crucial that we figure out if this is real or not. Because if this isn't real, and then you've got that level of power, that's really quite disturbing. People say what the harm is. There's the harm.
Do you think maybe she might have been trying to shock her into not having another attempt at killing herself by warning her about this or something? She might have been attempting that. She might have been thinking she might have been doing some good by saying that.
Yeah, probably, but who's she to say that that's the best way of doing it? We have people who are experts in counselling people like that, and clearly this woman in the audience was not dealing well with loss. She was seeing psychics, she was smearing her husband's dead ashes over her body, and she was trying to commit suicide. I don't think the stage psychic, even if they had psychic ability, is the best person to counsel that person on how to avoid having any other problems in their life, how to deal with grief. People say that they're helping people move on, but they're not. They're keeping the wounds open, because if you've lost someone, it's incredibly painful. We've all lost people, and it's the hardest thing in the world to deal with. But there are stages to grief, and you have to move through those stages of grief. You have to get to a point where it's acceptance, and you can move on with your life, as hard as that is. But if you think the person isn't gone, they're just in the next room, and this person you're paying can speak to them, then you're never going to move on. And why would you? That you love this person. Money is nothing to keep that connection open.
I've heard you talk on the Skeptics with a K show before about what kind of woo you would like to be real. Is there one that you would like to be real? An afterlife or some sort of ability?
Well, for me, it's not the afterlife, because I think as a psychic ability, it's not that, because I think the thing there is, for psychics to be real, it comes with this whole other stuff of so people are still around somewhere. So what is that experience like forever?
I'm glad you're saying this, because whenever people say that sort of thing, afterlife, if you could reliably talk to the dead, and I say this all the time with lots of interviews, so if I'm boring people listening to this, if you could reliably talk to the dead repeatedly, that would fundamentally change our society so much that our society would become unrecognisable.
Yeah, it would have a huge effect. But
there'd be no new knowledge. You could always ask old people. Everybody that ever been related to you could contact you and tell you what to do all the time. There would be not as much emphasis to drive forward.
Yeah, exactly. Because for me, the fact that we have a finite life and we don't go anywhere after this is one of the driving factors. So I want to do as much as possible. I want to help people as much as possible. People say that if you don't believe in an afterlife, then you've got no reason to live and there's no purpose in life, and what's to stop you doing X, Y, Z? Well, why would I ever want to harm someone if I know this is their only shot at life? How could I live with myself if I know I'd materially harmed their only chance at existence? Whereas if they live in the afterlife, then maybe I will nick this or punch them in the face over there, because get over it. You'll be fine in 100 years' time when you're an ethereal spirit floating around.
So what would you like the woo to be true? Is there some invisibility? Would you like to be able to move stuff with your hands without touching it?
Telekinesis would be cool. I mean, you could do a lot of fun stuff with telekinesis. You could really impress people at parties. You could have lots of adventures with telekinesis. I might go with that one, I think, because mind reading, I think, would be it'd be a double-edged sword.
Oh yeah, because then you'd find out what people were really thinking about you.
Yeah, and people tell me that enough anyway. And when people tell me what they think about me, it's nasty enough. So if they're holding back, I wouldn't want to hear what they're actually thinking about me.
Now, are people in the North a bit blunt with the skeptics? Like they don't just quietly disagree with you. They go, "Hey, mate, you're full of shit." I think it was a Scottish guy saying that, actually.
You know what? I've actually found the opposite, and maybe this is my northern bias, which I'm incredibly guilty of, but when we were handing out the flyers during Psychic Awareness Month, northern people were so warm about it. They were like, "Oh, thank you so much, love. Oh, yeah, cheers for this." And they were really lovely. Whereas when we were doing it in the south, people just kind of moved on. They took it, but they were just sort of stony silence. And maybe this is it could have just been a quirk of the shows that we were going at. Who knows what it's actually caused by. But my northern bias just tells me this is because northern people are inherently better in every single way.
Ad hominem, begging the question, factoid propagation, false analogy, false cause, false dichotomy, gibberish, immunised hypothesis, moral equivalence, poisoning the well, simple-minded certitude, stacking the deck, and WTF are just some of the fallacies we provide real-life examples of in Hunting Humbug 101, a podcast about bad arguments. Check it out at www.skepticsfieldguide.net.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Wow, that was an epic episode. Thank you, Jo Alabaster. That was an extensive report you gave, and wow, what a lot of research you had to do. This topic is still going on, and next week we'll bring you further updates as to the Tenpenny debacle, one might say. And thank you to Heidi Robertson from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters Group. Nice to have another Raw Skeptic Report. Oh, I hope there are more. I think you're a good reporter, and you write well. Heidi, if I may say so, thank you very much. And of course, next week we have part 2 of Maynard's interview with Michael Marshall. And next week's episode I aim to get out a day early, because by the time I would normally put it out, I'd be on a flight to San Francisco. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. If not, it might be a day late, but you'll still get your weekly fix of the Skeptic Zone. But for this week, with the rain still trickling down, what a pleasant sound that is. This is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.
Do-do-do-do, here's the audio, do-do-do. Don't use this for the Easter egg, Richard.